Well, of course, that they're leading us into a conversation. Of course, as I had indicated earlier, we want to talk about the dryland ecosystems and conservation, especially in the Tana River region of Kenya and many, many other parts of the country, just like that. One of the major products, of course, being the agro-pastoralism produce, that is sheep, goats, and the like. But really going beyond this, because when you talk about biodiversity, the ecosystem that supports them and the food that these animals will eat, what the people will eat, and of course, the nature around them, going into the conservation conversation. Now, to speak into that, Dr. Paul Matiku here in studio with us. He's the Executive Director at Nature Kenya, as indicated earlier. And we want to get into that conversation now, Dr. First, of course, karibu sana. And
Asante.
Talk to us about, we've been told that you've been in this for 2 decades. Talk to us about your organization. We, of course, are trying to disambiguate that from other organizations with similar names, and, of course, what you do.
Thank you, Peter. Nature Kenya.
Yes.
Easy to pronounce name.
Yes.
Originally established 1909 as the East Africa Natural History Society.
Wow, that means more than a century.
We will be celebrating, should it be 116th birthday on 28th of May.
And I hope KTN is invited.
Oh yes, you are always invited. At the museum.
Yes.
One of the babies that the society, Nature Kenya, is so proud of is the National Museums of Kenya, from where we operate. Our offices are based, and we have a lot of collaboration.
Yes.
But now it's a leading government biodiversity research institution, naturally, so it's institution based within Nairobi and with branches across the country.
Yes.
So Nature Kenya is a membership society, so we actually a public body, and any Kenyan is welcome to become a member, join the movement by paying a small fee.
Yes.
And so then you support conservation. Nature Kenya work is spread across the country. Those in Western Kenya, Yala Swamp. We are trying to save Yala Swamp. In Kisumu, Dunga. Kakamega Forest,
Yes.
South Nandi and North Nandi. Cherengani Forest, we are doing state-of-the-art research based on restoration, ecosystem service assessment, business cases, but also Mount Kenya restoration.
Yes.
Mukurweni valleys, which are communities that are living together with the highest bubble and bird species, which is very unique. But also Taita Hills, where we find one of the rare bird species where only 150 pairs remain on Earth and is only present there. But Arabuko Sokoke Forest, where communities are known to have transformed their livelihoods by exporting pupa as part of butterflies, as part of engaging in alternative livelihoods. But Akaja Woodland, which is unprotected, and the communities there are keeping the Clark's River, which on Earth is only known to breed on seasonal wetlands inside the Akaja Woodland in Kilifi County, Patana Deota, the home of crocodiles, the home of elephants, the home of hippos. If you get to a boat ride from Kipini upwards, before you get to Garizen, you will have hit the highest concentration of crocodiles we have anywhere in Africa, possibly second to the Okavango Delta. Extremely important and protected land, communities living in harmony with nature. And the river systems too, like the Tana River Basin. You know, in places like Tana Delta, communities thrive on water which has traveled 1,000 kilometers or thereabout to arrive.
Yes, from Abadeas and from
Abadeas and Mount Kenya, down through the Ngariza, the drylands, all the way to the Indian Ocean. And that shows the interconnectedness between systems, the Indian Ocean, the drylands, the mountains, and the people are all one.
Quite an impressive list there that you paint for us. Quite a large area, quite a large footprint, quite a lot of impact. Some of the places you've mentioned remain unprotected, so to say, and the potential for impact either through development, like you talked about the Tana Delta. We know they're putting up new dams that are planned for that ecosystem. You've talked about places where tourism business is going. We've seen the encroachment of farming into some of these places. When we talk about conservation and biodiversity, creating that balance, where do we start?
Conservation, as it used to be known before our colonial masters arrived,
Yes.
was just a normal way of life of our communities, going out to find fruits
Yes.
and have a living from fruits,
Yes.
going out to catch and dig or kill and dig
Yes.
for their food, as food.
Yes.
Going out to cut a few sticks here and there to make houses. They were not complicated houses. Or killing some larger animals to make skins for their clothing.
Yes.
A lot of clothes were made of skins.
Yes.
And for that, no one complained about snake bites. No one complained about elephants invading crops. No one complained about lions attacking livestock, because humans and the wildlife and the ecosystem were intertwined in one life, what is today being described in global conferences as living in harmony with nature.
Living in balance.
But that balance
Yes.
was broken
Uh-huh.
by greed, by the quest to convert trees into money, soils into minerals, and food into storage, and elephants and ivory, to do things that pleased human beings.
Yes.
To the extent that the damage became so severe, land had to be set aside to protect wildlife. That was wrong.
Yes.
That is where we got it wrong. They should have been about communities continuing to live on their land in a harmony with nature and being supported to maintain that system. But today, it's being discovered that the approach of protection, excluding communities,
Local communities.
was wrong, cannot work, is not effective, a different approach has to be employed, engaging people. But it is happening at a very high cost,
Yes.
because globally scientists have told us that the ability of the planet to meet the needs of humans is reaching tipping point.
Shrinking.
That means we can hardly find clean water to drink. Clean water used to be out there in the world, not in water dispensers.
Yes.
We can hardly find fuel wood, those sticks for cooking. Communities can hardly find those sticks for cooking, fuel wood, called fuel wood. We can hardly find food to eat, because the very soils that generate the food
And depleted.
are depleted. And generally you find humans' ability to survive is reduced to money. And our communities, especially here in Africa, are poor.
Yes.
That means ability to cope is difficult, is very challenging. And this is complicated by climate change.
Yes, you paint quite a bleak picture, and for me, it's a good thing that we started there, because I then want to take you back and say that people generally do not understand the amount of damage, the changes that were wrought by the colonialism, the colonial history that we had, and the uprooting from culture, uprooting the balance, removing people from that living within this ecosystem, and the fact that people now can no longer relate to the land. So that, are you able then to tell us, this is where we started, this is where the rain started beating us, and this is what we have to do?
We started with a balanced system where communities, our people used to live in harmony with nature.
Yes.
Wildlife used to roam all over. And, for example, even the Maasais don't eat wildlife.
Yes.
They eat livestock. So they were never a threat to wildlife. We got into a system of capitalization of nature and turning nature into capital, converting raw materials into money,
The
and
monetization.
transporting these materials using technology from one place to another, which then led to wealth creation. And we became capitalistic to the extent that with money creation If a country does not have money, you are poor. And today, we are finding ourselves in a situation where we have to go back to where we got it wrong and embrace communities. But also, the world has transformed. Money is at the top of everything.
Yes.
Capital is on top of everything. So we are at a level where we have to create a new balance. And that new balance is becoming very elusive, because it's a balance that is being created at a time when some parts of the communities, some parts of the world are consuming beyond what the ability of the planet is able to
produce.
to cater for. And other communities are so impoverished that they may not worry about a changing environment. And so we need to create a new balance. That's why world leaders recently, they met in Montreal and they came up with a tool they call Global Biodiversity Framework. That between 2020 and 2030,
Yes.
there must be a change. The change towards sustainable land use. Change towards restoring places which are degraded.
Yes.
Change towards restoring species that are in decline. Change towards producing food in a way that allows our future generations to produce the same. Change that allows policies, laws, regulations that are able
Yes.
to be implemented by governments of the world to ensure that nature is put at a place where it is valued by everyone. Change that brings public awareness,
Yes.
but also change that brings business, private sector,
Yes.
at the center of declaring their dependencies on nature. Peter, we live in a world where
Yes.
businesses take it that money does not come from nature.
Yes.
And so plowing back to nature is not a priority.
I want to interrupt you because we have to go to a short commercial break. But then to bear in mind what you're saying, because it's important to figure out the challenges that are happening and how people, organizations, and those players must also have a role to play. And also just the fact that some of the instruments that have been used by the capitalist directors have to be the same tools that we're using. But that is after the short commercial break. We want to go on that break now. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Well, we're back for the second part of the Farm Kenya show here today. My name is Peter Wakabra, and on this second segment, we're shining a spotlight on hardworking farmers who are making a difference in their communities. Now, this week, we take you to the Tana Delta, which we've been talking about, where conservation efforts by Nature Kenya are helping farmers adapt to climate change while improving their livelihoods. Now, from growing resilient chili crops to sustainable poultry farming and rearing hardy goats, these three farmers are proving that with the right support and climate-smart practices, farming in arid and semi-arid lands can be productive and profitable. Let's meet them and hear their inspiring stories.
Pilipili ni kitu iko na soko kubwa na soko lake liko guarantee, si kama mazao mengine. Na pilipili hakuna mambo ati imekataa kuzaa. Pilipili inazaa throughout for 3 good years. Iko kwa shamba tu. Unavuna kila Monday na time nyingine unavuna after every 2 days. So kuna Monday na Wednesday delivery. So utakuwa unavuna tu. Na faida yake ni kubwa sana. So kwa eka moja ukivuna unaweza pata around 60,000 per week. Ambayo hiyo ni pesa mzuri. Na hakuna ukulima mwingine unaweza kupea pesa kama hiyo kwa wiki. Hakuna.
Nature Kenya wamempeleka kwa mama mwingine. Nafikiri anaitwa Lucy Baringo. Huyo mama akawa anafanya mradi wa kuku. Sasa vile ametutrain yule mama, mimi kurudi akili yangu tayari iko kwa kuku. Nature Kenya wakaamua kunipatia incubator ya 264 eggs. Mwaka jana 2023 nimejaza hizi nyumba tele. Nikawa na kuku around 700. Kwa hiyo nimefanya biashara yangu ya mayai nikajiinvest kidogo, nikajenga nyumba, nikanunua hako kagari kananisaidia. Baadaye nikasema wacha nigeuze kuku, nikasema wacha niweke, baada ya kuwa kile chakula cha layers kimepanda, nimesema wacha niweke improved kienyeji. Huyo mbuzi pia ni mzuri, yaani mtoto akizaa hamalizi miezi mitatu ameshakuwa mkubwa tayari, yaani anakuwa kiuharaka tena, anakuwa na afya nzuri, sio kama wale wengine anakuwa wembamba. Yeye ni mbuzi ambaye akizaliwa mtoto wake anakuwa na nguvu zaidi. Maziwa yake pia mama anatoa maziwa mengi, mtoto ananyonya na shiba, na mimi pia napata ya kupikia, jirani pia wananunua. Hata ninaanza tena kujenga tena, nilikuwa nimeongeza hicho kirumu kimoja. Mwaka jana nikaongeza tena hii, nikaanza kuweka hii bloko moja, nikiuza ninaendelea kidogo kujengea kidogo hii nyumba. Nilikuwa nimeweka hii kiuno, nikaweka hizi. Sasa naendelea kununua bloko kidogo na kuongezea. Naona huyo mbuzi amenipatia manufaa mazuri, ninashukuru. Na faida yake naona ni nzuri. Hata nyama zake pia ukichinja, ana nyama nyingi.
Really inspiring, really interesting, really nice stories there from those three farmers. Of course, looking at the simplicity of their project, looking at the simplicity of the interventions and the impact and the difference that is making in their lives and in their communities. Well, Dr. Paul Matiku is still here with us in studio, speaking to some of those interventions, of course, and the impact that they can have. Let's start big first. Some of those places we've seen, like the Tana Delta, earmarked for really big developments. Coming quite soon, the Grand Falls Dam, of course, first to stop the flooding that we see in some of those places regularly, production of electricity and other interventions, of course, and things like farming. Do you think this will have the desired impact?
The High Grand Falls Dam can have the desired impact.
Yes.
But for the High Grand Falls Dam to have the desired impacts,
yes,
which impacts are not about terminating the livelihoods of communities downstream.
yes,
Impact not to terminate the ability of livestock downstream to survive.
yes,
The impact not to terminate the ability of wildlife downstream to survive, or the impact not to invite seawater intrusion to get into River Tana
yes,
and affect the livelihoods of communities. It is possible to redesign the High Grand Falls Dam in very simple ways. Downstream communities need water.
yes.
It is possible to design a dam that while it is filling, it provides opportunity for water to flow downstream.
So in this case, that is not the case. You feel that they are going to stop the water completely, thus creating all these challenges. You're saying the salination of the land, droughts downstream, the end of the regular flood, that sort of thing.
The current design of the dam does not assure that communities downstream will get water if climate change with drought and less water flow continues. But it is possible to design it in a way that allows that to happen.
Yes.
Also, deltas like the Tana Delta are maintained by flooding.
Yes.
The silt has to be released somehow. So if you hold back the silt in the dam without the ability to release the silt, you affect the dam in terms of its economic viability because it will seal off.
Yes.
And you affect the delta downstream because there's no more silt. So it's possible to look at the engineering of the dam to allow silt release. The other factor which maintains a delta where the communities in the Tana Delta depend is water flooding. Flooding can be less or can be too much.
Yes.
And what affects flooding is when it is unregulated. When you hold water for a long time without allowing it to flow, communities occupy areas that look dry. When suddenly you release too much water,
The flood.
all the water goes down, clearing everything. Sometimes even water flowing down creates a cloud of dust.
Yes.
And when water flows like that, it's going to clear everything. It is going to kill livestock. Wildlife will be killed, and the human beings will be seriously affected. And this has happened in the past.
Yeah, like we've
But
seen
that
in
can be
Thika.
remedied by constructing a second dam downstream, not far away, to store water.
Yes.
And then you have gates where you release water according to science to allow flooding,
Yes.
and at the same time allow human survival, wildlife survival, and livestock. Even in infrastructure will be destroyed every time there's a huge flood.
Once the dams are over capacity.
Dams like High Grand Falls Dam need engineering.
Yes.
And that extra cost comes with extra saving of costs, which would have been incurred if the original cost of doing the right thing was saved. And that's why it's important
Yes.
for the High Grand Falls proponents to reconsider the design and allow the right in design to ensure that 60 meter cube of water per second can flow and enter the Indian Ocean. This is after communities have drawn water for consumption,
Domestic use.
have drawn water for irrigation,
Yes.
because the Tana Delta is a Vision 2030 site where there is a plan for nearly 200 acres to be turned into food production. And it is possible.
Yes.
And this is irrigation based if the right technology can be found. But also this is a place where we have wildlife and we have different communities that coexist in this area. So it is possible if properly designed
Yes.
to help Kenya generate hydropower, but also water for consumption and water for irrigation, and keep the system going in terms of the economy in downstream, creating jobs.
Well, one of the things that might be really adversely affected are the wetlands. And we know that wetlands are usually a hotspot of diversity, hosting small animals, fish, insects, birds. A lot of them are migratory hotspots for birds that might fly across continents and those sorts of things. So really a lot at stake. Do you think we have what it takes to ensure that these changes are done?
Changes are about political will, about the right investment.
Yes.
So if the project proponents choose to invest
Yes.
and they choose to do the right thing, it is possible. The Tana Delta is a Ramsar site.
Yes.
The wise use principle applies there. And there's already a land use plan which has been developed by the Tana River and the Lam County governments. And a land use plan that provides for multiple land uses. Not the conservative approach alone, but also not the commercial conversion alone, but a midway kind of approach, which is hybrid scenario, which allows production at the same time the ways of life of the communities to be maintained. And all the stakeholders have agreed that this is possible. All they are waiting for is regulation of the flow of the water, with the Mount Kenya being restored, with the land degradation within the Tana River Basin being managed, with the water obstruction being done the right way, with the right water flowing downstream when required, then there's no reason why the Tana River Basin should not transform the economy of this country, while at the same time maintaining biodiversity. The Tana Delta is a key biodiverse area. It's a global hotspot. It's a tourist hotspot.
Yes.
If there can be security, it's between Lam and Malindi.
Yes.
There's no reason why this should not become a tourist hotspot if the right investment can be done. The communities there have been poor. There's no reason why the communities in the Tana Delta should have poverty rate,
Yes.
which is at the level where it is calculated today. They have the resource, they can live better with the right tools in place. Yes.
A lot of the things that we've talked about are things which subsist in, so to say, the borderland communities. So places that are dry, they often tend to be towards the places where 2 or 3 countries will merge, that sort of thing. The UN had done a report on this and saying that often these communities will suffer the vagaries of not just being marginalized, but also interventions because of security, like you mentioned, so that they're hampered in movement, they're hampered in trade, they'll not be able to interact with other communities in ways which enable them exchange goods and services and biodiversity and those sorts of things. So some of the proposals made then were that affirmative action needs to be made to recognize, first, of course, the pastoral nature of these communities, their need to be able to trade sometimes across borders and those sorts of things. Do you think as a country we are being able to start to put in place such measures for these marginalized communities in these places so that first they can take charge of their resources, so that we then become inclusive in conservation with them, and that they are then able to eke a living that is dignified and meaningful for them in those spaces?
Peter, actually, if you do proper wealth assessment of counties, you will be surprised that the counties that are pastoralist, they have a lot of wealth. They have a lot of capital.
Yes.
It's the prioritization of actions in those places that is needed. For example, if you take Tana River,
Yes.
Nature Kenya has developed a meat business case. And that meat value chain
Yes.
in the Tana has potential to employ a lot of people, generate income for the pastoralists, ensure that livestock is not walked long distances and does not lose meat weight.
Yes.
And that value chain is the investment that is needed in pastoralist areas, and not look at pastoralist areas as virgin. Virgin in the sense that that meat seems not to be valued.
Yes.
Turn the equation around and get meat to be valued. In those places, pastoralist areas, women, chicken,
Yes.
we have seen evidence that chicken can enrich women and turn them around, because most of the times they are left at home in the forest,
Yes.
and they can do chicken. One beehive in those places is enough to generate more income
Yes.
than an acre of maize in an dry land where, with the climate change, rainfall is not assured.
Really?
And that's why Nature Kenya has factored, and I'm not doing a promotion with African beekeepers,
Yes.
a business enterprise in the Tana, where they're buying honey in frames. And communities are producing honey and are failing it within the private partnerships
Yes.
and getting income. But also, even without a private sector coming in for honey value chain, honey at the level of the household fetches any money the household asks for,
Yes.
sometimes higher than what you find in supermarkets for the same quantity of honey. And that shows there's a lot of potential.
Yes.
The right investment in agriculture needs to be done. Communities are also engaging in wildlife conservation,
Yes.
conservancies. They need to be recognized as protectors of wildlife, be put in the equation of benefiting from wildlife, get them to be included, those areas to be included in the tourist map,
Yes.
and promote those places and promote investments at the community level for them to be able to earn incomes from ecotourism, and not look at lands that are possible to transform into agriculture as just maize or sugarcane. But also the system in the Tana, the water which flows. Nature Kenya has developed a land use plan based on science, strategic environment assessment, which did an assessment of how much water is flowing
Yes.
And if well regulated, it's possible to produce food, while at the same time maintaining livestock and at the same time maintaining biodiversity. It's possible to achieve an equilibrium in the Tana Delta and live within the true spirit of Tana Delta being a Ramsar site. Wise use.
Yeah. So when you think about the entire ecosystem that you've talked about, back in the day, our forefathers knew the intrinsic value of the various things in the ecosystem, from plants to things in the soil to different kinds of trees, different medicines, those sorts of things. Now, today, that information seems for most Africans not to really exist. But you find that there will be foreigners who are able to come in, identify things, carry them out, that sort of thing, case in kind. We've seen instances of times when people will go to places like Marral, Baringo, those places, and will ferry out sandalwood and things like that. People don't know what this is. Wanaona tu miti, you're told, if you bring this sort of tree, I'll give you 200 shillings. They go cut those things down. We've seen instances where people are exporting rare kinds of medicinal plants and animals and those sorts of things simply because of the lack of knowledge. How does the creation of this knowledge play within this entire story of conservation?
Peter, that's a very good question. And it gets back to the times when communities got lost it.
Yes.
And the balance that used to exist, where communities used to live in harmony with nature, was lost because of capitalism, as we said earlier.
Yes.
in this program. And today, the solutions lie in community empowerment and in formally training communities to rediscover
Yes.
their power, their potential, their capability, their ownership on the resources, but also on developing appropriate policies and regulations. For example, recently, Kenya has developed regulations on access and benefit sharing, which is supported by a global regime on access and benefit sharing to ensure that piracy is reduced. Communities discover what they have. And when people appear on the ground,
Yes.
trying to access resources, take away resources,
Yes.
they ask, who are you? And what is there for us?
Yes.
Even in governments of developing countries did not know what to do. People used to come, get out to the bush,
Yes.
talk to people, go to herbalists, extract things,
Yes.
take them away. So they start public awareness and knowledge development, which is taking place. And within Nature Kenya, we have discovered that
Yes.
wherever we work, we must engage communities. We call them site supporting groups. These are nucleus of change. They educate, they advocate, they communicate, and they engage with the rest of the community. They organize them into opportunities that they can engage government,
Yes.
demand accountability within government, prepare their own memorandum when the county governments are doing integrated development plans
Yes.
and annual budgets, so that their plight is factored in government planning, because it's a government which has the resources, it's a government which has the policy. And now within the framework where county governments are largely new,
Yes.
there's a lot of policy and development, regulatory frameworks,
Yes.
and governance systems to ensure that communities are empowered and are able to take charge of conservation. It
Yes.
should not be about protection by government, but protection by the people for the people.
Yes. So in 30 seconds, your final thoughts, because we've come to the end of this conversation. When it comes to the balance between conservation, productivity, finding livelihoods for people, where do we strike that balance going forward? 30 seconds.
Empower communities to produce, engage private sector
Yes.
to work with communities, and engage government to engage
Yes.
communities and the private sector, and give communities the room to participate, engage in a positive way,
Yes.
and ensure there are safeguards that ensure that the engagement of people, the engagement of private sector within government business and government approaches, everyone is safe, and
Okay.
nature will be safe.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Paul Matiku, Executive Director at Nature Kenya. In fact, the passion is coming through in the way you're talking about this, something really close to your heart and close to our hearts here on Farm Kenya, of course, knowing that when it comes to the farming conversation, it's not just about maize and beans, like you said, but also about the livestock, about the other parts that are not normally talked about, especially in the conservation space. Thank you very much, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
Asante sana. So we, of course, are at the end of our conversation here today on Farm Kenya, but we'll be back again tomorrow at the same time, so do make a date with us. Up next is the news in Swahili. Do stay with KTN. My name is Peter Wakaba. Kwaheri ya kuonana.